Okay, we have had a ton of people requesting this video. I'm going to be excited to dive into some breakout wide receivers, and we're going to do it differently. I don't want people just going through and scrolling and looking at the pictures of the players. So I'm going to talk about wide receivers that the entire community thinks is going to break out, and I will go receiver by receiver saying, okay, yeah, I think that he probably is being appropriately priced. We should assume that he breaks out this year versus, oh, everybody thinks he's going to take some massive jump up. However, I'm going to be off of him. The perfect example of a player we'll be talking about later on in this video is going to be someone like Gabriel Davis. Gabriel Davis's best finish ever at the wide receiver position was this past year whenever he was the wide receiver 70 on a per game basis. However, people are assuming that you are going to get the breakout, and you're seeing him being drafted as the wide receiver 26 on Underdog Fantasy. So those are going to be the type of players that we are going to dive into. But before we get into it, please make sure you go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football, leave a comment letting me know a player that you think will break out this upcoming season. And that should be it. Let's go right into this and let's bring up CeeDee Lamb. Now, yes, I get it. I know what you were going to say. CeeDee Lamb has already broken out. CeeDee Lamb last year was the wide receiver 16 on a per game basis. But right now on Underdog Fantasy, in real money drafts, he's being drafted as the wide receiver 6. He's being drafted right behind Davante Adams at the wide receiver position and right before Deebo Samuel. The running backs being drafted in this range, you have Joe Mixon, you have DeAndre Swift. He's being drafted next to the elite tight ends like Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. So people are expecting that CeeDee Lamb's going to go from a mid wide receiver 2 to that top end elite alpha option. And it makes sense. He did take strides forward going into his second year. He jumped up his target share in this offense from about 17% to 20%. He also rose his yards per game from about 58 to 68. That's a big jump in Dallas. And he got more efficient as well. He actually was averaging 2.2 yards per route run compared to 2 according to Rotoviz. Now, what is most exciting about CeeDee Lamb is the combination of talent improving as well as opportunity in this offense. Because we know that Amari Cooper gone to Cleveland, but something flying under the radar is actually Cedric Wilson leaving as well. Because you do have names coming in. You have Jalen Tolbert, who was drafted in the 3rd round. You have Michael Gallup, who hopefully is healthy, hopefully good to go by week 4, week 3. I don't know this upcoming season, but they can't take it all. And if you're looking at the amount of targets that are leaving Dallas right now, 165 targets. 165. Dalton Schultz played 17 games last year. Dalton Schultz can't take any more targets than he already has. And going back to what we were talking about, CeeDee Lamb continuing to progress as a talent, this is a player that is extremely young. He's only 23 years old right now. He is younger than these players in the NFL. He is younger than the first quarterback drafted in this year's NFL draft in Kenny Pickett. Just to give you some context, he's younger than a rookie in this year's NFL draft. He is younger than Najee Harris. He is younger than Jalen Waddle. He is younger than Devontae Smith. CeeDee Lamb is going to continue to improve as a talent, and you should have assumed that CeeDee Lamb's fantasy points per game was going up regardless of what happened with his situation in Dallas this offseason. However, it has gotten dramatically better. So I know a lot of people will say, oh my gosh, Mason, drafting CeeDee Lamb on Underdog Fantasy at the beginning of the 2nd round as the wide receiver 6 off the board, that's crazy. That's nonsense. I disagree with that statement. I think that CeeDee Lamb is appropriately priced here as an early to mid 2nd round selection in fantasy football drafts this upcoming season. Keep in mind, if he gets that bump up to a 25% team target share and he is playing in the Dallas Cowboys offense, the Dallas Cowboys top 5 in pass to rush ratio in neutral situations, top 5 in pace of play. They were number 1 in points scored this past year. If he can carve out an even larger role with this offense, he truly does have an elite ceiling where he can break out into that elite range. But real quick, if you're wondering how you go out there and actually draft CeeDee Lamb today, go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Over there on Underdog Fantasy, you can get into real money fantasy drafts with us on the live stream today, with people in the public lobby, with your friends. Really, whatever you're wanting to do. And when you sign up with promo code FLOCK through the link in the description, they will match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. You will also get our 2022 rankings, our dynasty rankings, our rookie rankings, and our dynasty rookie drafts guide. So please take advantage of that. But now let's move over to a wide receiver that, not gonna lie, y'all already know it, so I'm not going to hold off on you. Michael Pittman Jr. is being priced as if he is going to break out all over the place, and I can't buy into it. Now, before I speak negatively on Michael Pittman Jr., let me go through the positives, because there are positives. There's a reason that people are willing to go out there and draft him in the third round. Right now, Michael Pittman Jr. has an ADP in the middle of the third round on Underdog Fantasy as the wide receiver 14. This is despite him being a high-end wide receiver 3 on a per-game basis last season as the wide receiver 28. Now, I want to dive into positives here. He had a yards per route run at 2.1. For a second-year wide receiver, that's incredibly impressive. That was almost right up there with CeeDee Lamb. Now, keep in mind, CeeDee Lamb is a year younger, but still, that's impressive. And he also went out there and had that target share that we want from CeeDee Lamb. He had the 24.8% team target share as a second-year player in Indianapolis. Both of those marks, fantastic. Now, if we are going to be realistic with ourselves, can we assume that this gets better? Can we assume that Michael Pittman Jr. goes from having a 24-25% team target share up to a 27 to 28%? I don't necessarily think so, because if we go through and if we look at his target competition last season, he was going up against old man T.Y. Hilton. He was going up against Zach Pascal. He was going up against Ashton Doolin in the running backs. He had no target competition whatsoever. That is how he had that elite level target share. Now, I can't take that away from him. Having that elite level target share, regardless who your target competition is incredibly impressive. But projecting this forward, we need to figure out, where does the improvement come from? Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, Mason, it's easy. Matt Ryan's coming over. And I will agree with you. Prime Matt Ryan, MVP Matt Ryan, Super Bowl Matt Ryan. That player leaps and bounds so much better than Carson Wentz. And it's not even a conversation. But we need to be realistic with ourselves at this point in Matt Ryan's respective career. Matt Ryan is now 37 years old. Matt Ryan was traded for the same price as Carson Wentz this offseason. Now, I know we want to pretend like we know a lot more than the NFL. Now, also, we can say that maybe the Indianapolis Colts just timed the quarterback market perfectly, and that's how they were able to get the same asking price for Carson Wentz that they paid for Matt Ryan. There are a couple different variables here, but we do need to acknowledge the fact that the NFL marketplace determined that these quarterbacks were at least in the same ballpark. They were traded for the identical assets, but we can just say they were in the same ballpark. They were in the same tier for what they cost from an NFL standpoint. And what we can also do is we can say, okay, well, with Michael Pittman Jr., how does he go from being that high-end wide receiver 3 to being a low-end wide receiver 1? How does this happen? Well, the touchdown rate can come up. And this is what I do want to point out, and I want to agree with you. The touchdown rate at 4.65% for Michael Pittman Jr. can come up this upcoming season, because what do we need to see for an above average league touchdown rate? We need to see a good offensive environment, and we need to see that wide receiver either be speedy or probably tall. Michael Pittman Jr. is 6'4". If anybody was going to have a touchdown rate ahead of league average, it would probably be Michael Pittman Jr. So I think that's where the potential bump can come from. But that is hitching your wagon to the fact that Matt Ryan is going to elevate this offense. And if we go back, while Carson Wentz looked very bad, while especially remember the very end of the season, the last game you had from Carson Wentz, it was laughable. What we can say is, okay, well, Carson Wentz last year was 13th in the NFL in adjusted yards per pass attempt at 7.3. This is compared to Matt Ryan being 19th in the NFL with adjusted yards per pass attempt at 6.8. And Carson Wentz led this team to being a top 10 offense in points scored. Now, I do not think that was 100% because Carson Wentz. I think that's mainly the offensive line. I think that's mainly the coaching staff. I think that's mainly Jonathan Taylor, and Matt Ryan should be better than he was last year coming and stepping into this situation. But are the Indianapolis Colts going to go from a top 10 offense in the NFL, which they were under Carson Wentz, to a top 5 offense in the NFL, which that's what we would want to see if Michael Pittman Jr. was going to be a wide receiver 1 in fantasy and was going to make that elite level jump, as a lot of people are projecting him to right now? I'm not buying into that. So while I agree, Michael Pittman Jr. does have very, very impressive marks on his resume with his target share as well as his yards per route run. This is going to be a rush first offense. He probably has more target competition this upcoming season than he did last year with Alec Pierce coming over. So when he's going ahead of players like Jalen Waddle, who was a wide receiver 1 as a rookie last season, when he's going ahead of DJ Moore, when he's going ahead of Hollywood Brown, I am personally not drafting Michael Pittman. I'm going to prefer the other wide receivers in this range. I would even take Kyle Pitts. I'd take James Conner. I would take Patrick Mahomes. There are a lot of players I'd prefer over Michael Pittman Jr. in drafts right now, but I understand why a lot of people think he is going to break out. And now let's move over to our next wide receiver, someone that I am excited about. Let's go over to Jerry Jeudy. Now, before I speak positively on Jerry Jeudy, I have to admit a couple things. Jerry Jeudy has been a train wreck. Jerry Jeudy has been atrocious so far in his NFL career. He has been the wide receiver 73 on a points per game basis in 2020. That was without Courtland Sutton. Remember, Sutton out for the year. And he was the wide receiver 64 on a points per game basis in 2021. Now, what I do want to point out is he had improvement across the board. He went from his target share being about 16% up to 22%. Bravo. He went from his yards per route run being at 1.7 to 1.9. Bravo. So you see slight improvements there with Jerry Jeudy. Very similar to CeeDee Lamb, still incredibly young. I mean, that list of players, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Kenny Pickett, they're older than Jerry Jeudy as well. This is someone that we should continue to expect improvement from. And this past season, if we are looking at his raw points overall, yes, it was a train wreck. It was horrible, but we have to be fair. He had some of the, if not the worst quarterback play in the NFL. Okay? And that is going from Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock to now he's getting Russell Wilson. And with Russell Wilson coming over, we can assume he's going to have top 10 quarterback play. At the very minimum, you can make your argument, oh, Russell Wilson's the top 3. We can all be in agreement. Russell Wilson's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL today. Okay? I'm assuming that's consensus. And if we go through and if we look at yards per route run for wide receivers in this offense this past year, which all of them had a bad situation. All of them had the same quarterback play. Jerry Jeudy at 22 years old, almost 4 years younger than Courtland Sutton, posted 1.9 yards per route run compared to Courtland Sutton at 1.5 and compared to Tim Patrick at 1.5. So 22-year-old Jerry Jeudy was the most efficient wide receiver in Denver last season. And we speak about this all the time. But if you look at the season totals for both wide receivers, Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, it looks like it's the wide receiver 1A, wide receiver 1B show. But no, that's not the case. If you look at the splits in games that they both played, this is where you see that massive gap. There have been 11 games where Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy played together this past year. And in those 11 games, Courtland Sutton has averaged 5.4 points per game compared to Jerry Jeudy, still pretty bad, at 8.5. So almost double the production than what you had with Courtland Sutton. Jerry Jeudy, 46 receiving yards compared to Courtland Sutton at 23. So that is double. You have Jerry Jeudy at 3.9 receptions compared to Courtland Sutton at 2. Neither wide receivers are scoring touchdowns, but hell, they have Teddy Bridgewater. Hell, they have Drew Lock at quarterback. What are you expecting from these guys? So with Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy has been the wide receiver 1 in this offense at 22 years old, almost 4 years younger than Sutton. Jerry Jeudy should continue to develop given the fact he's younger than some rookies coming into the NFL this year. And if you're getting top 10 quarterback play coming over, Hell, I'm completely fine drafting Jerry Jeudy. Going back over to Underdog Fantasy, where y'all know we're going to be drafting every single day until the season starts. Go sign up with promo code FLOCK so you can get some drafts with us. Right now, you have Jerry Jeudy going as the wide receiver 22. He's going directly in front of Courtland Sutton, directly in front of Allen Robinson. And in that range, if you're wanting wide receiver, I probably prefer Kittle. I probably prefer Breece Hall, David Montgomery. I probably don't want to draft a wide receiver there, but if we were going to go with one, Jerry Jeudy probably would be my pick. Now let's move over to our next guy. Let's go over to Gabriel Davis, Mr. Playoffs. I mean, someone coming out and posting one of, if not the best playoff game for an NFL wide receiver of all time, at least with the context of it, where they're going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. And realistically, how many games were better than that Chiefs game last year when Gabriel Davis came out with 8 receptions, over 200 yards, and 4 touchdowns? That's ridiculous. I don't know what else we can say about that. Now, everybody saw that game, and it's not like you know something that nobody else does. Like, let's be realistic. Is there a single person watching this video right now that did not watch that Kansas City Chiefs Buffalo Bills game where Gabriel Davis posted over 200 receiving yards? I doubt it. If you haven't, what I would recommend is close out this video. And I never want to tell someone that, but close this video, go watch that game, because Gabriel Davis was an absolute monster. And Gabriel Davis stepping into a beautiful situation. One of the best situations you could ever ask for this upcoming season. You have both Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders gone, opening up 183 targets in this offense. Going back to what we were speaking on with Dallas and CeeDee Lamb, this Buffalo Bills offense last year, they were top 5 in pass to run ratio in neutral game script and pace. They're going to run a lot of plays. They're going to throw the ball a lot, and they're going to have elite quarterback play. And Gabriel Davis is about to be an every down wide receiver in that situation. What else could you ask for? What else could you want from Gabriel Davis? Now, there is something I could ask for. There's something else that I could want. What I want is, instead of Gabriel Davis just now stepping into the Emmanuel Sanders role and just now commanding that volume, if I was going to buy into the fact that Gabriel Davis is someone that we need to draft in the 5th round of fantasy drafts, I want to see Gabriel Davis go back into time machine in last year and not have Emmanuel Sanders dominate him at 34 years old. I want to see him get on the field over 33-year-old Cole Beasley, over 34-year-old Emmanuel Sanders. Because he wasn't able to do that, I honestly want to say the day 3 pick that got outplayed by 34-year-old Emmanuel Sanders, he's probably not a great NFL talent. Now, does that matter too much if he's going to be placed in a fantastic situation? I think it comes down to the situation you were looking at, where you were going to be drafting him. Because right now, I'm looking at Gabriel Davis being drafted right in between Chris Godwin and Travis Etienne on Underdog Fantasy. 2 picks behind Lamar Jackson. I am never considering him there based on a couple of the red flags that we are looking at. Based on the week-to-week spike potential you have with the Gabriel Davis, I understand why people are getting excited about him in best ball. He has upside, but I think way too many question marks to be drafting right next to Chris freaking Godwin, who is just the wide receiver 1 year after year after year. But now let's go over to Rashod Bateman. Rashod Bateman also stepping into a lot of targets this upcoming season. I mean, we were talking about a lot of targets being gone in Dallas, a lot of targets being gone in Buffalo. Rashod Bateman has Hollywood Brown leaving his offense, and Hollywood Brown over the past 2 seasons has averaged 25% of this team's target share. And now Rashod Bateman's in a wide receiver room. Well, trust me, I love Devin Duvernay. I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard me say this by now. I went to University of Texas with Devin Duvernay. I used to see him at the rec all the time. Like, trust me, I want to root for the man. He's not a number 2 in an NFL offense. No, he's not that good. This depth chart behind Rashod Bateman is atrocious. Now, with Bateman, he is also, I want to say, from a talent perspective, a lot better than someone like Gabriel Davis. I mean, if we're going through and looking at what he did at Minnesota, he broke out as a freshman. He, at the same time, dominated targets his junior season. Then he declared early for the NFL draft. And on top of that, he was drafted in the first round. He checks almost every box you want to see from a wide receiver prospect perspective. Now, it is difficult because he injured his groin going into last season. So it's hard to look at any numbers from his rookie year. I mean, he played with Tyler Huntley. Tyler Huntley was an atrocious quarterback. Lamar Jackson's not a great passer, but Lamar Jackson's averaged 7.7 adjusted yards per pass attempt. Tyler Huntley was at 5.1 this past year. Tyler Huntley was horrible. So it's unfair to really evaluate anything we have seen from Bateman. But what I will say is, I'm concerned that this Baltimore Ravens passing offense is going to be funneled through Mark Andrews and is going to run the ball continuously. Because if we combine 2019 and 2020 and we set it to neutral game environments, the Baltimore Ravens are the most run-heavy team in the NFL with Lamar Jackson, and it's not even close. They run the ball on 57% of plays. 57%. It's hard to wrap your mind about that. It's hard to believe that's true. It's hard to believe that's accurate. And we know that Rashod Bateman has no chance at all to be the number one receiver in this offense because that will be Mark Andrews. I bet a lot of money that it's Mark Andrews. I really got to hope that it's Mark Andrews. So I wish what we could do is we could take Rashod Bateman, take Gabriel Davis, flip them into different situations, put Rashod Bateman in Buffalo, because in Buffalo, Rashod Bateman could be a wide receiver one in fantasy. Where I'm unsure if that can actually happen in Baltimore, but long story short, I think the wide receivers that I'm willing to draft at their ADP and assume that, hell, these guys, they're breaking out into that next tier. I'm willing to bet that CeeDee Lamb is that elite level wide receiver this upcoming season. Jeudy, I think, honestly, is a strong bet as well as a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. Where we get to Davis, where we get to Rashod Bateman, it's a little iffy. Gabriel Davis has the situation. I don't think he has the talent. Rashod Bateman has the talent. I don't think he has the situation. But thank you again for being a part of the flock and supporting the channel. I would love to know your opinion on these players down there in the comment section. And yeah, that's all I got for you. Go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK so you can get in some drafts with us. I'll leave that link down there in the description. Have some fun. Go draft on Underdog. I think that's all I got. Have a great day, and I'll see you with the video tomorrow.